Hello, welcome to Real Anointed Needed Talk platform. Rant for life, where you can rant, but one thing about it, you have to be real and you have to stop lying because we already know that it isn't easy. Okay. Well, we've been having a sessions on for the last week of January, the 27th and the 28th, and also today is our third session. And let me give you something, let you know what this podcast is about. Okay, be real, stop lying. It ain't easy. Present a series on ministering to those with mental illness and how to help those from mental illness. And we featured qualified and distinguished guests. It's a 4-session podcast that will discern how to help those who are suffering from a mental illness, okay? And all our subject matter has been in reference to mental illness and the Black church. On January 27th, Reverend Casey Combs, and you can go to YouTube channel ReVELLIS 50 and review that podcast. Those podcasts are still up. And then on January 28th, our guest was Reverend Angela French Coles, and that all of our podcasts is up on YouTube channel ReVELLI on the Real Anointed Needed Talk platform. Okay, on that playlist. I'm going to bring in our guest right now, the Reverend Dr. Yes, here she is. This is Reverend Dr. LaShonda Fletcher, and I want to welcome you to Real Anointed Needed Talk.
Thank you.
It's nice known to be here. I'm so glad that you are able to come. Yes, and join us and talk to the people about during this mental health season. But before we get started on this session, I want to let the audience know a little something about you. Okay?
Yeah.
Let's see. Everything prepared. Okay. Well, Dr. LaShonda Fletcher is a gifted Sunday school teacher and a conference speaker who demonstrates a mighty love for God and for others. LaShonda accepted her calling into the ministry in May 2010. She accepted a position as co-pastor of New Revelation Ministries on October 7. Completed her in ministry with the focus in pastoral care and counseling in May of 2022. She has a master's degree in religion, a master's in marriage and family therapy, and a certificate in Black church studies at Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary. It was matriculated in May 2015. LaShonda also, her first book, The Black Church and Mental Health, in 2015. And in 2019, she released her second book, You Can't Give Up Now. So LaShonda, also, she's in ministry. She is working, going forth in her ministry, and she opened Revelation Counseling Center in Smoketown, Old Louisville area in 2015. Also, she has been very busy in the ministry. So 4 years later, God has allowed her to purchase her center South Louisville, and she will be opening Carla's Wellness House in March 2023, which will be an extensive outpatient facility. So LaShonda has also been married to Reverend Carl Fletcher for 23 years, and they have 3 beautiful children. I can attest to that. They've grown up so fast. Carl Jr., Zion, and Miss Ella. Yes. Yes. So we welcome you,
Thank you.
to Real Anointed.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So we're going to turn it over to you. And I do have a couple of questions that was emailed, and we'll just bring that in at the end of the session.
Okay. All right.
So I'm going to turn it over to you, wherever you want to start.
Okay. So I am super excited. So we're going to start. I know our topic today is on the Black church and mental health. And so I'm hoping we can kind of have more on the lines of a conversation style thing today. And so one of the things that I uh, thought about when I started and did my book, The Black Church and Mental Health, is I felt like that there was definitely a lack of understanding when it came to mental health within the Black church. And so the Black church, a lot of times when
Okay.
someone come up to the altar and say, hey, I have depression or I have anxiety, a lot of times we are simply told to just pray about it. And so one of the popular pastor, of course, Rick Warren, was one of the first people who had talked about mental health and how the church handles mental health. And he was talking about if we fall and break our knee, then one of the first things the pastor is going to
Yeah.
tell us is to go and get help, right? And so he did not quite understand why pastors do not tell people when they are having severe mental health issues to go and get help, and why pastors just simply tell them to pray about it versus praying with them and, of course, telling them to, hey, go and get help and go and talk to somebody.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
and so that was one of the main things that he was saying. And so I believe that we have a lot of stigmas and we have a lot of taboos associated with with mental health within, of course, the Black church. And so I'm not sure, Pastor Rene'e, what your experience have been like in as far as mental health in the Black church.
Well, the previous session, we said that it has been a stigma of, I don't know if it's just not being humble enough to just tell the people that you're not qualified to handle it, and the reason why a lot of leaders, pastoral leaders or ministry leaders, is just warding it out and just looking just straight to and giving it to the people to pray, as you said, to pray about it, and not giving them the real help that they need, because we would not have mental health therapists such as yourself, if it was not God's will for his people to be helped outside of the capabilities or the lack of capabilities of some of the ministry leaders, because all does not have the same gift. And we know that.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But in the church, there's a lack of acknowledging that, just saying, I don't know, I can't help you, so here's some resources that can lead you in the right direction. Instead of doing that, it's been just not paying any attention to it and just not addressing the situation.
And see, one of the things that is interesting. I'm sorry. Are you talking? It's kind of breaking up on my end. Okay. And so
I saw yours is, I see it is.
Okay. So one of the things that to me is important is, like, when we think about pastors, and even me being a co-pastor, I know that pastors wear many hats, right? And so it's like, it's okay for pastors. I tell pastors all the time, it's okay for you to take that hat off and understand that there's also a difference between, of course, spiritual counseling and mental health counseling, right? And so pastors knowing the difference when somebody is actually having a spiritual issue to where they might need prayer, they might need scripture, versus them actually needing a mental health professional. And so being able to understand the difference between those two. And so when I did my doctoral research, that was one of the topics that I researched, was actually helping pastors to understand what mental health is and understanding the differences between spiritual counseling versus mental health counseling, and understand that, yes, you can talk to a congregant, you can pray with them, you can give them scriptures, but if they are having symptoms of anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, things of that nature, then they really do need to see a mental health professional. And so one of the things that I did is I asked the ones who were willing to be a part of my study if they could identify, like, what depression was, what anxiety was, some of the regular mental health things that happen to people on a day-to-day basis, if they could identify what those symptoms were. And most of the pastors were not able to identify what the symptoms was for just basic mental health conditions like depression and anxiety. And so it's like, okay, well, if somebody comes to you and they say, hey, Pastor, I've been sad, I can't get up, and I've been wanting to sleep, I've been tired, I feel worthless, haven't been showing up to church, and they usually show up at church, then that person is most likely suffering with depression. And so those type of symptoms are things that pastors need to know in order to make sure that their congregants are referred to the right professional, right? And so those are the things, to me, some of the simple need to educate themselves as far as just the basic parts of mental health. So that way they'll kind of know what they're dealing with when their congregant comes to them for help.
Well, I wanted to ask you, in your study, since you brought that up, that you did in your research, that you did address the issue with different pastors and gave them those questions. Did you find open and honest as far as receiving the information that you had, or the dialogue, should I say, as far as them not acknowledging that they were not equipped?
So the interesting thing is most of the pastors, I will say, that I actually had, most of the pastors were very educated. And so a lot of them actually, the beautiful thing is I had 5 pastors. All of them was African-American. 2 of them were African-American men. 3 of them were African-American females. And most of the pastors that I had could tell when somebody was coming to them, whether or not they were equipped or unequipped. And actually, a couple of them actually had a resource list of people that they actually referred to. So I was blown away and excited about the fact that at least a couple of them had those resources. And then the other question that I had asked these pastors was, have you ever went to therapy yourself, right? Because I'm a true believer that if I haven't been myself, then the chances of me referring my members or my congregants to seek help or to get therapy is going to be very slim. So I feel like that pastors also need to recognize their own need for mental health, because, of course, and I know, of course, as being a pastor, there is a lot of pressures on pastors, especially when you are a pastor of a smaller church or a mid-sized church, and you got all of these mega churches out here and feeling like you're effective. Are you doing enough? And that's not counting, like family issues or work issues. If you got a full-time job outside of, pastoring, those type of things, and are other people's expectations of you. And so pastors also need to be healthy and seek out their own mental health. And I think that will also help them to see that counseling and mental health therapy is okay. And so,
it's like in some instances, almost like the blind leading the blind. Yeah.
And so one of the things that I have created, which will be released in March, is basically a pastoral guide for pastors and to help them understand mental health. And so it's going to give a nice overview. It's going to have like tools in there for them to be able to use and be able to kind of like assess congregants to be able to know whether or not this is something that they can help with, or something that they need to actually send, to a mental health professional. And so, but I do think that really when it comes to mental health, we're talking about in our community, we're family getting to a space to where people are beginning the process of trying to break down some of the stigmas and some of the myths that's associated with mental health. Because I know you probably have heard yourself, oh, well, don't take that pill. That's a crazy pill. And it's like, okay, well, if a person have mental health issues, and if they have a severe issue, then guess what? They need that medicine the same way I need my high blood pressure medicine, right? And so I don't understand why, when it comes to mental health, stigma, around it, or you're airing out your dirty laundry, and why people have such a hard time understanding that our brain, our mind is a part of our physical body. So when something goes wrong, it's a medical issue and it needs to be corrected, and a person needs help.
And we're in Black History Month. So the thing is that Black people have a history of being conceived.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that, and I had read about it, said that there are many reasons that Black Americans are likely to not to receive mental health support because of the stigma and the socioeconomic disparities and the mistrust in the community because of the medicine. We have this opioid epidemic that went on, where medicine was just given freely and without even community. Do you feel that it has weighed heavily on the fact that pastors and even congregants or just social society and Black society overall, just will not get help because of that stigma and that mistrust?
Of course. And don't get me wrong, I will say this, and that is that Black people have a right, okay, to have that distrust. And so a lot of this goes back to the whole Tuskegee syphilis experiment, right? And that is when they did that whole syphilis experiment and that caused a big distrust around when it came to African American men. And so a lot of times we was trying to figure out, well, why do I have such a hard time getting my husband to go to the doctor, right? And they sat here and did this to all of these Black men, and some of them, of course, they caused them to have syphilis. Some of them didn't have. I mean, it was just a big mess, and so some of these people ended up losing their life. And so the reality of that is that guess what? We have a right to have this distrust, and then a lot of us don't understand why the men in our life still don't like to go to the doctor. Well, that distrust, mistrust for the medical system stems all the way back to grandfathers and great grandfathers, and it just kind of trickled down through our history. So we have a right to mistrust or not trust the medical system, because of course, even when it comes to psychiatrists, and have a tendency back in the day to misdiagnose African Americans. And so that's why I tell people when they call me, or if I refer them to somebody, it's like, okay, I have to make sure that I refer this person to somebody that's culturally competent, right? And that means that guess what? If I'm Pentecostal or if I'm non-denomination, if somebody come into my therapy practice and say, hey, God told me this, I'm not going to immediately go to, did you hear was it an audible voice, or was it somebody sitting on your shoulders? I'm not going to ask those type of questions, because I understand the thought process of a person that is Pentecostal, non-denomination, or even just African Americans, and our need to have a close relationship and fellowship with God. Whereas our white counterparts, on the other hand, if they're not Pentecostal or non-denomination, or don't believe in God at all, and I go into their office and say, hey, God told me this, and this, then they're going to immediately be like, this person said that God spoke to them, and they're going to start asking, was that an audible voice? And what did that voice sound like? And next thing you know, you end up with this misdiagnosis of this person got schizophrenic, or is schizophrenia, or they got psychotic features, those type of things. And that's not the case. It's just a difference in cultural or religious belief systems. You understand what I'm saying? And so that's another reason why people distrust the medical system.
And it's the vernacular that the religious. Yeah, and I was just saying that it's it's the terminology that that the religious sector uses, that can be misinterpreted, by someone that's not familiar with with the denomination or of that practice. And because I've experienced, I actually experienced twice diagnosed or a as far as mental concern, and it made me step back, and I had to really search myself and pray about it to come back and embrace, the mental health issues that there are viable. That's why I was so happy when I met you and that you were going off into the mental health field, and it being a therapist. thought that is, Black women, men, in this field, so that because you understand our culture,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
plus the trust issue will not come up, as far.
Mhm.
But yeah, there's been misdiagnosed. I've had to deal with that in my family, misdiagnosis, which was tragic results from it,
Mhm.
and it made me skeptical, so
Mhm.
others, that might not even have had that experience, but already have that deep rooted mistrust, of
Mhm.
the field. But I know that it says that, and we talked about Black Americans have faced immense historical trauma and adversities from racism, discrimination, and exclusion from health, education, social, and economic resources in this country. So, as you said, that kind of puts a bridge between receiving help. So, do you feel like that's why it's very important for the pastors, the clergy leaders, the ministry leaders to be versed in this mental health topic?
I think it's very important. And the one thing that I do notice too, right, and that is that if a pastor send me a text message and say, "Hey, LaShonda, I'm going to send somebody to you," give it a few minutes later, my phone is ringing. Why? Because as African Americans, we have a serious trust. We have a deep trust for our pastors. And the reason why we have a deep trust is because we feel like that they have this great connection to God. And we also believe that they're not going to lead us in the wrong direction. And so a lot of times if pastors say, "Hey, I'm going to have my member to call you," then that member calls me because they actually trust their pastor's leadership and they trust their
Trusting.
guidance. And so that's the reason why I feel like that pastors should have a nice list of therapists, at least 2 or 3 of them on their list that they know personally, that they know that it's good. When this person, when I send my congregant to your office, that they're going to get the proper mental health treatment that they deserve. And I'm sending them to somebody that I know that understands our religion, that understands this person's faith, and is not going to misdiagnose them.
Right.
So, an example of that is I had a girl who came to see me like many years ago, and she needed an extended period of time on her test, right? So she went to a therapist and she asked him to write a note. This was a white male therapist. So she can get extra time to be able to pass this test,
Mhm.
which was an extensive test. It was for hours long. She suffered with anxiety. And so she asked him to
Mhm.
write the test and they would be willing to give her a couple of extra hours. Well, he writes the note and he puts in this note that she is mildly mentally retarded. Now, note she had anxiety and PTSD, but he
Mhm.
told the people
He told the
where she
people.
was in college that she was trying to get
Mhm.
into and get accepted into that she was mildly mentally retarded.
Right.
Now, if that wasn't racism, I don't know what
Mhm.
is. So, in other words, if I
Right.
present as retarded, if she presents as retarded, and I tell them that she's retarded, then they're not going to let her in, and they're not even going to allow her to take the test. And so, it's things of that nature
They're
that
not
cause
gonna know. Yeah.
people to kind of have this distrust when they're going to people that don't look like them, that might not necessarily have their best interests at heart. And so that's not to say all people are like that, but some people are. So I do think that it is important for pastors to
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely
It's
have
very,
a conversation and
very
get educated
important
on mental
for.
health.
Yeah. It's very important. Yeah. For us to have
Mhm.
Black therapists that understand our culture,
Mhm.
and that can, and it doesn't have, you don't have to deal with that racism, because it's there, it's
Mhm.
real. That's what this
Mhm.
podcast is. Be real, stop lying. It's not easy. It's not easy
Of
living
course.
in the world that we're living in now, especially, yeah, it's even more so. Level is going up, so there's going to be more and more people that are going to be in need of a therapist, because of the depression and the anxieties of just
Mhm.
trying to live. you know
Mhm.
when you think about eggs, it's $8. My grandson told me the other day he saw eggs for $8. I mean, eggs.
Yeah. Mhm.
That's an
Mhm.
anxiety
Mhm.
trip for some people, so I haven't had eggs in a month. So
Right.
that's,
Yeah.
that's an issue with me.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, because my diet is very limited. I have a very limited
Mm-hmm.
diet.
Yeah.
So for not to be able to put eggs in my diet messes with the balance of my nutrition.
Yeah.
At my age.
Mm-hmm.
You and so that's the issue. And
Yeah.
but do you feel like there's sometimes that the anxiety or the symptoms of depression and things of that nature is not taken seriously, within
Of
the
course.
culture?
Yeah, and we come from a culture, right, of we supposed to be strong, are we supposed to be these strong black women, are duped because of slavery. You understand what I'm saying? It's like we supposed to be strong. We're not
Mm-hmm.
supposed to show
Yeah.
any signs of weakness whatsoever, right? Or if we show signs of weakness, then also too, when we're talking about the church, then that means, okay, well then you must lack faith, and that's another
Mm-hmm.
difficult
Yeah.
thing. Like I had a young woman who
That's,
came and stood by the door. She was afraid to just walk into my office, black female. And then when we got to talking about medication and stuff like that, that's when she told me that she was prescribed medication, but she
mm-hmm.
felt like that if she took the medication, then that meant that she lacked faith. And I was like, that is not true. You understand what I'm saying? And so,
Mm-hmm.
in the way that I convinced her was
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, if you
Right.
take this pill for a week and you start feeling better, then what harm did it bring you? Because then you're going to continue to feel better. But if you take the pill and you take it for a week and you don't like it and it don't make you feel better, then you can always just
Mm-hmm.
flush it down the toilet. But it's worth giving a try, especially considering that you have
Right.
such bad depression, and like you could just feel the sadness just, just
Yeah.
coming off of her. I'm talking about she was in deep despair,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, it's like to me, I'm like,
Yeah.
just you coming to my office is faith. You understand what I'm saying? Faith that God's going to send somebody to help you to be better. But that's not the way that
The
she was
fact
looking at it.
that
She was
you
looking at
acknowledged
it.
it. Yeah. And you sought
Yeah.
help. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so I will tell people
Oh.
all day, when people say things like that to me, when they call people crazy, I personally feel like that a person have to be crazy not to seek help, not to go to therapy, because I think even any person who really don't have mental health issues, they can still benefit from therapy at least once a month, once every couple of months, just to walk, I mean, just to process, just to go over goals, just to,
Walk
you
through it.
know,
Yeah.
uh, yes, exactly. And so there's a lot of benefits to
Yeah.
getting mental health treatment and help. hmm and so
Right.
when it comes to pastors, right? Uh,
It's a lot of times you're going to give them a yeah. I think we haven't. It's
yeah, I couldn't make out what you said.
but we're just going to keep talking. I know. Yeah, mine's froze also. But
Hmm.
if the person knows that they're skeptical, knows that they're just encouraged to try a session
Hmm.
and not just at them. You know, that will help them dispel some of that fear, as you were saying.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that they can see how they. In other words, they build up trust issues. They can build up trust with the therapist.
Hmm.
Is that correct?
And just ask a lot
Before
of
you get
questions.
off into talking about giving them medicine, things like that, especially those that, yeah,
Well, and
that
then
they can
also,
get their questions answered.
yeah, and ask questions when you call, right? Like when you call to set up an appointment, because most people don't need medicine. Let's be clear, right? When you're talking about mental
Mm-hmm.
health, we're talking about a spectrum. And so I don't want anybody to think
Oh,
that when
yeah.
they hear me talking on here, I can't even prescribe medicine. So anybody who come and see me, you're not going to get a prescription, okay? But let me
Mm-hmm.
say this: you're
See, and
talking
that's the
about,
misnomer that needs to be, yeah, that's what needs to be
yeah,
talked about. Because when you
hmm
say therapy, that's the first thing they think you're going to walk into the office, because it They start writing out lithium, and all these mess. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Don't you think that somebody needs to talk to them first and see where they're at? So take some kind of test. I thought, and so the family member never went back because of that first experience, Yeah.
And so that goes back to knowing the difference in mental health professionals, right? So a psychiatrist and a nurse practitioner is going to be the only two, or either your doctor is going to be the only three people that can write out medications for mental health. Okay, so if you're a licensed clinical social worker, a licensed marriage and family therapist, or a licensed practical counselor, we do psychotherapy. So we do talk therapy, or they might be specialized in EMDR or trauma therapy, those type of things, but we cannot prescribe medication. Now we have usually a list of people that we can refer you to if a person needs medication, but that's not what we do. Now we do diagnose. We do assessments, like mental health assessments. So if you're depressed, and you can get a depression assessment done, anxiety depression, assessment done, a mood disorder assessment. Usually a mood disorder is some kind of bipolar disorder a lot of times, whether it's bipolar 1 or bipolar 2, those type of things. And then we usually do talk therapy. We have tools that we can use. We can do meditation. We can do sand tray therapy. We can do cognitive behavior therapy to help people with ruminating thoughts, because a lot of people have thoughts and they have a hard time being able to control their thoughts. And it just seems like they constantly focused on the same thing, right? And so we can help with those things, or help with worry, those type of things. So that's what we do. We don't necessarily write any kind of prescriptions, whatsoever. And so people do need to know about mental health professionals. Now,
they need to know that. Yes.
The differences between the people it is that you actually go and see. So some people go to a psychiatrist and think, oh, well, I went to therapy. No, you went to see a psychiatrist, and they are going to be the ones that's going to probably talk to you for about 15 to 20 minutes and then prescribe you medication. And so then a psychologist is also a psychotherapist as well. And so they actually do diagnosis, psychotherapy, and then they also do special diagnostic testing and stuff like that for like ADHD, and stuff, and autism and stuff like that. So they might go a little bit deeper than what we, go, but it's a vast difference between us. So you're not going to get medicine when you come and see me. Yeah. So it's
when you
about
come there. Right. And these are things that people need to know, Yeah.
And it's about learning the difference is exactly what it's about, and being able to, be open-minded. I tell people all the time, now, this is the other thing, right? And that is that as Black people, we also need to understand that just because we are Black does not mean that we have the same belief systems. So if you are a Christian,
right,
and you want a Christian therapist, when you call that office, you need to say, hey, what's your beliefs? What's your faith? Because whether we realize it or not, in this new generation, there's a whole lot of people that don't believe in God, that don't believe in Jesus. They will say that they are spiritual, those type of things, and they do not believe in God. Some of them are feminists or womanists, and some of them don't necessarily believe in the entity of marriage, and so if you have marital issues, then guess what? That might not be the best person that's going to help you. So that's why I'm like, when you go, ask questions. Before you go, when you call, ask questions, and it's okay for you to ask questions. And if they don't want to answer your questions, go to find another one.
Find a therapist that's going to you really need, and that will break down the barriers as we were talking about, that distrust. We'll break down
somebody that's going to line up to your belief systems, and that's going to line up to your morals, right? And your values, because not everybody believe like you. Just because they look like you don't mean that they believe like you. And if you're fighting for your marriage and you go to somebody who don't believe in marriage,
especially in the world. So I was thinking, dealing with young people in the in the what we're dealing with now is we seeing so many young people in crime, committing crimes. I mean, it's random crime. And it's just increasing. So we look at it and we say, what is your take on the reflection on that type of thing? Being a therapist, what is your view on that?
Oh man.
Yes.
I don't know if I will have a popular opinion here, but I do believe that the beautiful thing about being a therapist that it gives us very good insight into the African American community and our plight. And believe me, there's a lot of things that is definitely going wrong within our community. I believe that we have very much lost sight of our morals, our values, our foundation, and our roots. And I think that a lot of folks have lost their way. I think that a lot of these young boys are out here, they're angry. They're looking for acceptance. Some of them, fathers might not be present. And that could be due to maybe their daddy was not present, or maybe mom and dad's relationship ended in a very bad way, and she didn't want him to see his kids. So we got layers upon layers of issues right now going on within our community. And then it's like, okay, well, what role models are they, who are they looking to for role models? I know back in the day, my husband always talked about, well, they had the drug dealers and they also had the pastors. You understand what I'm saying? The pastors had the nice looking wives, and then the drug dealers had the nice looking wives. And so the reality is like, what does home life look like, for these kids? Is mom or dad taking these kids?
Like? Yeah.
Are they installing values into their kids, and are they living that type of life too, as an example to their kids? Because we can preach all day long, but if we're going to preach this to our kids and then we're not living that type of life, then don't expect for the kids to follow what it is that you actually say. I know personally with our kids, from a very early age, we told them exactly who they are, what our expectations are. And even when we're not in front of you, you need to understand that you are a Fletcher. And this had nothing to do with us being in the church, because when my first son was born, we were not pastors, but we also still had integrity in our last name. And we wanted to make sure that he was a young man of integrity. And his brother and his sister too understand that there is integrity that's attached to your name. And we expect for you to be able to move and operate in that integrity when your daddy's not around. And so I think that's the other reason why I said sometimes it's about our morals, it's about our values, and what it is that we are actually pouring into our kids, whether they come from a single family home or whether they come from a 2-family household. What is it that you are actually installing in your kids? Are you giving them God? Are you giving them values? Are you giving them integrity? What is it that you're actually teaching your kids? And then are you actually walking in that as well, to show them that, guess what, this right here is possible, and I'm capable of being able to live this out.
Right. That's good. That's really good, because it does start, like you say, it starts with the family. And, it's whatever that family dynamics or whatever that family foundation is. And we have so many young people raising babies, and they don't have the foundation. So how can they tell their child, or raise their children up if they haven't received it themselves? And plus their minds are still young. So I'm looking at that, the mental health condition or crisis, especially, and this is Black History Month, so I'm really focused on the Black community. We need more therapists, I would say. We need more people to get into the field of being certified.
I do think that we're getting a lot more African American therapists in the field. I do think the other issue that we have is a drug issue, because we're also talking about kids having to be raised by their great grandmothers, because mama's on drugs and grandmother's on drugs, right? And so it's like, how does a great grandmother, you understand what I'm saying, handle a kid that's 14, 15 years old that want to run the street,
Yes,
and they could
yes,
be up in 80, or late 70s. They can't fight them. They can't spank them. They can't,
right,
put them in timeout, or whatever, because guess what? At this point, this kid is stronger. You
right,
understand what I'm saying? And
right.
so the
Yeah,
other thing that we're
he already
with
knows it
is
all. Yeah, right.
and so that, and then on top of that, when we think of it from that standpoint, right, then we're also dealing with a kid who's also angry because why come my mother don't love me more than she loved the drug, or why come my father don't love me more than he loved the drug, and then also having to go out here and try to fend for yourself and try to buy clothes for yourself, or go out here and
Mm-hmm.
try to sell drugs in order to even help whoever it is that you are living with to possibly live. And so we got, I
Right.
feel like layers upon layers of issues, I think, going on within
Layers.
our community. And internet influences that we've never had
Well,
before.
I applaud you, all those listen. Yeah.
hmm
Yes. So I mean, yeah, misinformation travels so fast now,
Of course, especially
and
when it comes to the
we know
church.
all of our young people are going.
hmm I
Yes,
mean, like right
yes,
now on
yes.
social media, there are so many negative things that they are saying about pastors, or they saying about the church. If a pastor do something or have some kind of
Hmm.
a conduct issue, then it'll go viral. But the pastors who are actually putting in the work
Yes.
and doing things for the community, a lot of times it gets overlooked.
Hmm.
And so then we have this whole generation of, why am I going to go to church?
Yes.
This pastor's crooked. They sleeping with women, whatever, is out there that's blooming. And then you got all of these people on here saying,
Hmm.
that's why come I don't go to church. And we're talking about thousands upon thousands of comments
Yeah.
and millions upon millions of viewers. And so next thing you know, it turns people away from the church because then they look at us as hypocrites, right? And so it's like, well, why
Right.
they can't tell me anything? Why should I listen to them if they ain't living the right type of life?
They're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Right.
So it makes
Right.
Christianity very difficult
It's in a
right now
crisis.
for some people.
Yeah. Christianity is in a crisis right now,
Yeah.
and though on the battlefield, so to speak, it needs to be applauded, but there's still so much more because we have to acknowledge that there's still so much passiveness in clergy, to whereas it's just not enough stepping up. There's even, and I want to ask you this because I was thinking about there's community organizations that are tutoring and in different taking different segments they feel will better propel the Black children on into being able to succeed. But I was thinking, and while you were talking, is that even those organizations, do you feel that they should have those resources, be aware that they need those resources also in that proximity with children? They might see something that somebody else doesn't see, that child might need help as far as a therapist, or someone to talk to. So do you feel that they should also be encouraged to, have resources as far as for the mental health of the children, that should be on one of their line items, so to speak,
Yeah, and I think it should be I mean, I know they have therapists in the school system, but I feel like that they should have classes in the school systems on mental health. Like teach kids how to meditate, right? Meditation helps people with anger. It
Mm-hmm.
helps kids with anxiety and with worry.
Mm-hmm.
It helps you to be
Yeah.
able to center.
Mm-hmm.
Breathing techniques help you to be able to calm down. Those type of things. And I feel like that
Right.
if kids were to learn those tools early, then maybe we might not have so many people out here shooting each other, and getting angry and then just flipping like that. And next thing you know, somebody's life is
Yeah.
lost. And so to me, I feel like that they should not just only have therapists in the schools, but I feel like that they should have some mental health classes to teach kids anger management techniques, teach people kids breathing exercises, teaching these kids meditation techniques, teaching kids, just how to process their emotions or have healing circles and things of that nature for them. And I think that would be a beautiful thing if we could actually get
Right.
that into the school system to be able to help kids to be able to deal with their mental health early on, or be able to learn how to speak their emotions, because when we think about males, right, what happens growing up
Hmm.
is, parents oftentimes
Yeah.
tell their sons, "Oh, you a big boy, hush it up." And you got these little boys that's out here and they up here, they trying to hold in every emotion that they have, right? But when it comes to little girls, we get paid up, "Oh, baby, it's gonna be okay," or whatever. So
Mhm.
then when men get older and we're trying to figure out why come he won't communicate his emotions, or why is the only emotion that he show is anger. Anger is a secondary
Right.
emotion, right? So underneath that
Mhm.
iceberg, you got hurt,
Underneath it. Yeah.
you got frustration, and these are all of these different words that they can use, but they don't know how to communicate those words because they were never really given the opportunity to. So anger is oftentimes accepted, you know what I'm saying, is an emotion, and it's a feeling within our
Yeah.
community. But when they say, "Hey, I feel hurt," then all of a sudden they're weak. And so that's the reason why, come on, like, we could really
Yeah.
benefit from having mental health classes within the school system to try to teach kids how to be able to identify their emotions. Because even as a therapist, when I first seen that whole big old huge
Right.
list of different emotions, some of them I had never even heard of before, and didn't even know
Hmm.
what it meant. Because there's only like 4 or 5 of them, of course, within our community that we've ever used or actually
That we
spoke out
use.
of our mouth.
Yeah.
Frustration, hurt, those type of things are,
Hmm.
anger, those type of
Shame.
emotions
You
are
know. Yeah.
heavy,
Stuff like that.
type thing. And it's like, wait a
Yeah.
minute, there's all of these other emotions that I could actually be feeling. Just simple stuff like that.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Right. Right. Just knowing, being able to identify them. You know.
Yeah,
And that's what you
and
actually would need,
yeah.
someone that knows that you speak to them how you feel and they can identify it and put a label to it,
Hmm.
to you better
And
understanding about how you feel, you know.
hmm and be able to process, like, the reason
So
why
I'm
you feel the way that
with,
you feel.
mhm. Can I have a caregiver? I'm going to ask you some of the questions you did answer
Okay.
in our discussion, but we have about 15 more minutes. But I was gonna we have a caregiver,
Hmm.
and it said that um perception of how they should deal with they parent, because they're the caregiver of a parent,
Hmm.
and the families having different perceptions of how they should deal with it, although the family's not there, is not visiting, they just, mouth and input. And so this person is starting to deal with a lot of anxiety,
Hmm.
because of the judgment and feeling like no, or they because they have different perceptions of the problem. So what kind of conflict resolution would you suggest for that family?
I would, me personally, of course, me and my husband's the caretaker for my father, right? And so,
Mm-hmm.
really, I would say that if they are not the ones who's actually caring for them, I mean, for that individual, and they're not, I mean, I'm talking about doing absolutely nothing, then my thought process is just to go ahead and set rigid
Yeah.
boundaries. You understand what I'm saying? Because in the end,
Mm-hmm.
people always have something to say when they're not the ones that's doing the work. You understand what I'm saying? And so if their
Yeah.
input is affecting them so much so to the point to where they have anxiety around it, then that sends a message to me that they need to
Mm-hmm.
separate themselves. Because I think that's the other thing when it comes to our community. We preach family, 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 and to be loyal to our family, and things of that nature. And sometimes we can be
Mm-hmm.
loyal to a point
Right.
of detriment to our own health. And so when it starts causing issues with our own health, then that means we have to separate ourselves, and that means we have to set strict boundaries. And so that might mean that when I see this phone
Right.
ring, if I know I'm not having a great day and this is that relative that always got something to say, then I'm not answering. And it's okay not to answer. You understand what I'm saying? And so setting those
Yes.
boundaries. So then that way they're protecting their own mental health. And then if that doesn't work for them, of course, I would say they could always do some family therapy.
Yeah, suggest family therapy, or even if not, if they couldn't get the family together, it would be good for them to have therapy so that they can
Yeah,
voice how they feel. Right,
And be able to
right.
process what
Everybody
would work.
doesn't need medicine. Someone needs somebody to talk to that they can trust. Yeah.
Of course.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that they can trust. Okay. Let me see. I'm trying to look at a question that you have not answered already. Um. In here, well, I distinguish this question and says that because of our culture, okay, that it's more likely that because this person is looking for a therapist,
hmm
but they've been going to, and they just didn't seem like they understood, or they would uh, misunderstand what they were saying, or
hmm
couldn't identify what they were saying. So
hmm
your suggestion to be to them is to find them, as you said before, a therapist who finish my statement. Finish.
hmm hmm Most definitely. I know, even me
That
myself.
understands.
hmm I had a therapist that I went to. Actually, I had two other therapists that I went to before I got my therapist that I have now, right? And so one of the ladies that I went to,
Mm-hmm.
she was a white, older female. I felt like by me being a therapist and her being a therapist, I felt very like everything was textbooky. So I didn't feel like that there was anything personal, or I couldn't get comfortable, and it was like I knew what the next question was going to be because that's what they teach us in school. And so and that was just it was just too robotic for me. So
Right.
I left her alone. So then I went and I found an African American female therapist. And I went to her, and I think I might have went to her twice. I always believe that you give them at least two times. And I went to her twice. And it was just something about the presence and the spiritual presence that was in the office that didn't set well with me as a believer. And
Mm-hmm.
don't get me wrong, I don't know what her religious belief systems was, but it was not setting, something felt real off
Right.
for me, and
It was
I
not.
didn't like that presence. And so now the therapist that I have now,
Mm-hmm.
me and her, I think she's probably been my therapist for like 7 years, and so I might see her once a month. I might see her once
Mm-hmm.
every 2 months. I might see her three times in 1 month if it's been a rough month, right?
If
And
it's been a rough
so,
month, yeah.
but she is an amazing fit for me. You understand what I'm saying? She's comfortable. She's a Christian. She's an encourager. She's a
Mm-hmm.
black female. She's older than I am. But I would send anybody to her, because I trust her in that way. And,
Right.
we have built that type of rapport. And so I
So
went until I found
what you're
that perfect
saying is,
for me.
okay. So what I'm hearing is that no matter, you're a therapist and you go see a therapist. So
Every
no
therapist
matter
should have a
what your
therapist.
occupation, or everyone
every
should
therapist,
have a therapist.
every
Yes,
therapist,
someone that
every
someone that
therapist.
you know.
Yes. Why? Because a therapist is taking in so much, right? So, an example, I could have one session and I could just be working with a couple on marital issues, simple tools, communication, or whatever. But then the next person that might come in might be a victim, might have been in and out of foster care, might have been
Mhm.
abused, and it's a heavier session, right? And so you want to try to keep it in the office, but some people's stuff is
Right.
so heavy, you take it home with you. And of course, me being a pastor, of course, I'm going to pray for them, but I have to have an outlet to be able to release some of that heaviness. You
For
understand what I'm
yourself.
saying? That I take on a day-to-day basis. And
Right.
so sometimes I get therapist clients, right, that are therapists too. And so
Yeah.
sometimes I might
Mhm.
get them in a couple session, and I tell them, hey, you need to get a therapist. I don't believe that any therapist should be practicing if they don't have a therapist, because you should be practicing self-care if you're going to tell your clients to
Mhm.
practice self-care, you know. But that's just my opinion. Some of them might be like,
Correct.
I can't
Practice what
believe
you
that.
preach. Yeah.
Yes, I said that.
Yeah. That's being honest, and that's what we need. And that's what we need. Real, that real conversation,
Yeah.
that you have being real, because when you said that probably got her to thinking, or him to thinking, that, wow, if she go see a therapist and she's a therapist, maybe I need to go see a therapist. I know I had went to a therapist because I had those, like you say, the thoughts just won't leave your head. My childhood, growing up, I wrote a book about it, but the sexual abuse,
Yeah.
the domestic, starting at a young age,
Yeah.
and I got to a period of time that it just kept floating around and I couldn't sleep. And so I went to the therapist and told me, just write it all out.
Mm-hmm.
Just everything from the first
Yep.
memory, just wrote it out.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to writing, and it ended up being a 5-series book. I only published one, which has the major the major trauma, who will hear guilty to proven innocent, and it tells the major trauma, and me overcoming it. But yeah, she told me to just sit down and just write everything that comes to your mind, just write. And I wrote it and then put it on the shelf for 20 years.
Yeah.
and I felt for 20 years I felt better. And then the Lord told me it was time to shed, to get it out of my head, memory that I felt, abuse. I had to write it down, my perspective, and everyone doesn't agree, with your perspective. I was on the my Bible study class last night, and it was pricking my spirit before I went on about all the criticism he's getting from sharing his perspective of his life, how he feel about himself. And I identified with him because I got the same feedback.
Yeah.
I receive and still sometimes with the same feedback, but it was my life and it was the shoes I walked in and it's what I felt. And I'm feeling the same with him, they always had that comes from a judgmental perspective,
Well,
and the culture that we live in don't want to use.
Well, I mean, because
they want you to be honest about yourself. Keep it to yourself.
Yeah. And so one of the things that I had to learn, and that was, I came from a domestic violence household, right? And so that's some of the things that I processed, throughout my therapeutic experience with my therapist, along with some things that happened during my seminary experience. And so I had to process those things and be able to work through those things. How can I not process those things, and then if somebody come in my office, they have had the same childhood trauma that I've had, and then next thing you know, I'm counter transferring my events onto this person. All right, now I'm triggered. Yeah. You understand what I'm saying? So that's why it's so important for therapists to have a therapist, because sometimes people will come in and trigger different emotions or feelings or things of that nature. And you have to be able to process that, especially if you've experienced trauma yourself, which is one of the reasons why a lot of therapists get in this field, is to understand mental health because of their own traumas, their own experiences, and things of that nature. And so one of the things that I learned too is that my experience and my sister's experiences are different. So I've processed and worked through majority of my trauma and my experiences. And so we're all on different journeys here. And so they might still be embarrassed when I talk about domestic violence or the fight or something that happened in our household. Well, I'm not embarrassed by that no more. I'm free from that. I've processed that. I've accepted that. And I'm able to move forward. And so when they're not able to move forward, then that makes them uncomfortable. But I can't control if you're uncomfortable, and I'm not going to censor myself if you haven't dealt with your trauma. Does that make sense?
Right. It does. It really does. And except as being real to you, then you have to just separate yourself, for your own, for yourself, because you can't take yourself back into denial just to satisfy, someone else's perspective about what you lived through,
Exactly.
So I think this has been very informative, and I know that our audience have they will on there until infinity, and later on this evening, it will be on Spreaker, Google, iHeartRadio, and 7 other podcast platforms. Soon as I transfer it over, right now it's on YouTube, and it's going to be up forever. And it's YouTube channel ReNe'Ellis 50, and it's we must get back together again. And I know the audience said, like I say, have enjoyed you. You've given us a lot of information. You made us feel so very comfortable in our own skin, that it's all right. It is all right to seek help. It is okay to seek help, and then live your truth, as I'd like to say. Be real, stop lying. It ain't what you'd like to say.
No, I'm good. I'm excited, and so I'm going to go back and watch the recording. If anybody would like a copy of either one of my books, these are I'm trying to get the camera in there, but this is my book, The Black Church and Mental Health. And then this one's my latest book, You Can't Give Up Now. And then I got another book that'll be releasing in March. So if you're interested, then you can always look me up on Facebook. And my name is LaShonda Fletcher. And of course, you'll see that. So just send me a friend request or inbox, and I'll get a book over to you. And so I just want to thank you.
Great. Well, we are so happy that you joined us on this podcast. Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, hey, I will be calling you again. There's so much that this world needs. Because Be Real, Rene'e L, Anointed, needed talk. Bye.
All right.
Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.